before you mentioned hormones, I was thinking hydration, because that is something when people are a little bit dehydrated, they can feel tired, they can feel hungry, they can feel off. And just like as little as 1% dehydration, that'll affect performance, like cognitive performance, but even like performance in the gym. And so that's something that can really help with energy levels.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have someone who is an expert in multiple fields. Her name is Katie Hardie. She is a board certified holistic nutritionist and FDN practitioner, and she is the one-stop shop for holistic health performance programming, and her company, My Peak, helps dedicated health and performance-minded individuals to optimize their energy management, nutrition, and body composition through a personalized, data-driven approach that takes into account her client's unique bio-individuality. That's a couple of things we're going to talk about today are energy management. I think we all want more energy. I'm sure many of us at times feel like we're lacking the energy we need to really get motivated and do the things that we want to do in our life. And each person is different. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Katie holds advanced training in nutrition, sports and performance psychology, strength and conditioning, and culinary arts. So with this comprehensive knowledge, her programs bridge the gap between scientific principles and practical application, helping all people. Each of her carefully designed programs combine functional lab insights, unique nutrition plans, strategic movement, and recovery practices to help people reconnect with their bodies and break free from one-size-fits-all solutions. Katie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is great. We got a lot of stuff to jump into. I know energy is like, I don't know, it seems like the most important thing, right? Like if you have no energy, you're not, it's like you can't do the things that make you happy. You can't really get motivated. So I'm really excited to jump into that. But maybe let's start with a little bit of background on your story and how you got into what you're doing today.
Sure. Yeah, I always kind of been interested in an odd way with performance. I don't know if you remember back in elementary school, the presidential fitness challenges. Did you guys have those?
I don't know that I had that.
This is
I
like the
was in
mile
public school in New
run.
York City.
Okay, it was the mile
Maybe.
run, the pull-ups, the sit-ups, the shuttle run, and like the V sit and reach. And I just remember in third grade, our PE teacher was like, all right, we're doing these. And I'd never heard of them. And she's like, we're doing pull-ups. I'm like, what's a pull-up? And then I realized I could actually do pull-ups. And she's like, oh, you got the record. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, I want to do that again, you know? And so I was one of those weird kids where when my parents were like, well, what do you want for your birthday? I'm like, a pull-up bar. And I wanted to like learn how to practice, but I didn't really, know what went into that. So I always had an interest with like, all right, if I could do this, how can I do more or better or just like, maximize everything. And so, going through high school, I had a good friend where we just were into conditioning and nutrition, but we didn't really have a great like coach or anything specific to us. And so you're just kind of seeking it out on your own. And that ended up being Self Magazine or all the recommendations of the 90s, which was basically avoid fat and probably avoid calories too. And so you're kind of missing, you're basically like working out more and depleting your energy that way, but then not really intaking any energy because you learned that that was bad. And it's very different paradigm than maybe what I understand now. I found myself in a very depleted state. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but, like standing up and getting lightheaded and just, my hormones were out of whack and body composition wasn't great. And kind of, in seek of like finding this right performance plan and somebody who's a go-getter and like, if this is good, more is better, actually find yourself in a place of burnout and total depletion, which actually decreases your performance and can lead to injury. And so it was quite a roundabout route of, doing strength and conditioning and nutrition and functional labs and culinary school to kind of figure out, energy provides nutrients, which is what your body needs in order to do all the functions it needs for just basic functioning, but actually performance and excelling and being the best you can. And so having that paradigm shift where food is not something to be avoided, but it's something that can actually offer nourishment and better off your performance, whatever that is, whether it's personal, professional, athletic.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen many times people, again, these low fat diets, for example, is one kind of old school. Yeah, I call it like 80s health advice. Like whenever someone tells me they're like, yeah, I eat oatmeal for breakfast and low fat milk and all this other kind of stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of 80s health advice. That's kind of how I refer to it. 80s and 90s, I guess. A lot we didn't know back then. Right. I think there was a Time magazine cover that had eggs on the cover, like vilifying eggs, like it was like a bad food. And now, I eat eggs every day as a superfood for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So for people, why do you think right now, why do you think so many people are struggling from a lack of energy? And maybe we'll get into some things that people can do to improve that.
Yeah, well, I think a couple things. One, I think a lot of people, especially females, have that same impression of what calories and energy is. It's kind of something that they're like, oh, hold off, avoid, let's caffeinate. And that's like a source of artificial energy. And
Mhm.
that's not giving your body the building blocks, the nutrients from the get go. So it kind of puts your body into the state of stress right out of the gate. And then what happens when you're in a state of stress? To get the fastest source of fuel, your body tells you, oh, I want something sweet. And so then you start going for like sweet, quick treats that are actually firing your dopamine and kind of throwing off that side of the equation. So it becomes this kind of up and down, spike drop with whether it's sugar and blood sugar levels, dopamine and the neurotransmitters. And you're just kind of, as soon as something drops, then you're seeking out the quick fix, but not really getting in front of it. So I think caffeine and sugar are big, real
Mhm.
energy busters.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for those listening, if you need 5 cups of coffee to get through the day, I think something's wrong there, right? You should kind of look into that and see what could be improved upon there. I mean, look, I love my 1 cup of coffee in the morning, but that's it. I don't do anything else other than that. And with my morning coffee, I do blend it with 40 grams of protein and some healthy fats, and it's basically like a protein shake coffee. But yeah, that's my 1 cup of coffee for the day. And yeah, I'm pretty sensitive to it. I know others are not. Different people metabolize coffee differently, but at some point you want to be, yeah, when you see people drinking these energy drinks, for example, all the time now, right? And you're just like, oh no, that's it's not consistent. You're going to get a spike and then you're going to crash. So we want sustained energy. We want, I guess we'll call it, like cellular energy. We want internal energy that doesn't come from outside stimulants. So what are some ways that we can have more of that?
Well, as far as food,
Hmm.
yep.
Yep.
So I think starting the day, and it doesn't need to be within the first 30 minutes or even an hour, but sometime in the first couple hours, telling your body it's safe through some sort of, like you mentioned, protein source,
Hmm.
because the building blocks of protein are amino acids, and that's this basic components that we need for muscle repair, muscle synthesis, or producing your immune system cells or digestive enzymes. Pretty much all your processes need that. So giving your body some sort of protein, and again, I'm not anti any of the other macronutrients. The reason I like to focus on the protein is because it crowds out the fluff, the things
Hmm.
that are maybe not going to provide the sustained energy. And so giving your body some nutrients that it can do something with earlier on in the day tells it's safe. So that will help regulate your cortisol or your stress hormones. And then finding the right foods that actually sustain you for a good 3, 4, maybe 5 hours. Because a lot of us kind of graze, and we were taught that for a while, right? That's the bodybuilder way of putting on muscle. But the problem is, to put on muscle, you need to have the right stimulus. And a lot of the people following that don't provide the stimulus. So then you're just telling your body, grow, grow, grow. But if you're not moving and challenging the muscles in the gym with heavy things, then it's kind of telling your body, oh, grow, let's put that into fat cells. Let's grow that way versus through muscles. So that's not incorrect advice depending on the goal. It's just when most people want sustained energy, they're wanting to have things that maybe have the right amount of protein and fat and carbs for their body, which can be very different for everybody. So getting something that you find will sustain you for over 3 hours, because a lot of us will have, like you said, that bowl of oatmeal with some maple syrup and not much protein or fat with it. And so, yes, it gives you that quick boost of energy, and then you drop a little bit lower. I don't know if you use a continuous glucose monitor, but that's a great way to kind of see what your body's doing with that energy, because we all are a little different. Some can handle that a little bit better than others. I'm not one of those people, and I tried to eat that way and follow the low fat, no fat thing back in the day. Tried the vegetarian route where, I was trying to do the right thing. And then my blood sugar, I didn't understand why, but it would drop low, and I would kind of get a little anxious about, when are we going to eat again? What's the next snack? Because it was very carb heavy back then, particularly. And as soon as I realized, oh, I'm more of a chicken thigh girl versus chicken breast, or I actually do well with red meat or more fats. And that was something we used to avoid. We used to go all in on the white bread, but skip the avocado because that was high in fat. But for me, the flip flop is much better. And a lot of other people are like that too. And so figuring out what that is for you, because what we don't want are those big spikes and dips.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, for example, that morning coffee protein shake that I make, I didn't even realize it today, but I think I had that at 7:30 a.m. I ended up going to the gym at 11:30, came back at 1 and ate, didn't, wasn't even hungry until after my workout, after 1 o'clock, from a 7:30 a.m., protein shake coffee. And then, again, and like you said, I think finding those foods, that's a really key one, finding those foods that will keep you kind of satiated for at least a few hours at a time. So you're not constantly, and I think that's the kind of the issue with the carbs as well, right? Is that, I tried the vegan thing back in the day as well, and it didn't work out well for me as much as I, wanted to hope that it would. It's a very, very high carb. And then it was like, and then I'm like, no, I'm going to be a raw vegan. So then it's like, all I can eat is fruits and vegetables. And I was just never satiated. I was literally
Yes.
hungry all the time and just wanted to eat every day. So I think protein, we do know is more satiating. So that's why I think, yeah, having that protein is probably a huge piece of it.
Yes. Yep. And
Yeah.
I think in America, we've kind of glamorized breakfast as like, well, we've kind of made breakfast a glorified dessert, and it doesn't need to be sweet. I like to tell people, like, think savory, especially like athletes, because if you're thinking savory, the odds of getting more protein are higher than if it's sweet. Because if it's sweet, like you said, it's going to be definitely somewhere in that carb category. And again, athletes, everybody need carbohydrates, just in the form of vegetables or fruits, or, depending on the person, they may or may not be able to handle the, like, whole grains or legumes. But
Mm-hmm.
savory, you're going to kind of minimize that blood sugar spike drop with the processed carbohydrates or with just the sugars. So I think I like thinking savory for breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
when that's an option. It's not always an option for people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How does, maybe let's explain to people real quick, how does blood sugar affect your energy? Like, how does, like, the blood sugar spikes and drops, how does that affect your energy, and why is it important to kind of try to be as stable as possible?
Yeah. So, what happens when it spikes? That's actually a stress response. So back in the day when, you're running from the bear, um, your body and able to get itself ready for fight or flight, pushes all this blood to the muscles. Your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is a stress response. And your body's, you know, like, designed to have that happen and then have it be done and then move on. When we have foods that increase our blood sugar, that's also a stress response. And when we're constantly doing that, then that's part of that issue of that chronic stress where it starts hardening the arteries, thickening that. But on the energy side of it, when you spike it, because of that energy being mobilized, that can create that feeling, like that anxious feeling. It can create, that faster heart rate, just feeling a little uncomfortable. But then afterwards is the problem, because the insulin's like, get that sugar out of the bloodstream, because that's damaging to your blood vessels. It's shuttling it into fat for storage. A, that's fat storage. B, when your blood sugar drops, it drops lower than where it started. So that's where a lot of times people can feel tired or brain fog or need to take a nap or not focused. I actually had a client, teenager. I have them use a continuous glucose monitor for the first month. And just to correlate our physical energy, blood sugar levels, but also your mental focus and your emotional place you're at, because she realized after she eats ice cream, it spikes, but it's the drop when it drops low. That's when she cries or she feels sad. And so to have that correlation, that understanding of an awareness of what the blood sugar levels are doing with our energy is really important, because a lot of those foods are what's really accessible and convenient, and it becomes normalized to have those things. So when you're kind of swimming in this pool of like, you never know what good feels like until you have an alternative. And so it's a really great exercise to see what a different option can be. And, sometimes when we're feeling anxious, sad, depressed, that isn't necessarily like a need for Wellbutrin, but maybe let's look at the foods, and are they stabilizing our energy or spiking and dropping them?
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, a whole nother topic, whole nother side topic that we probably won't get into today is the effect of food on your mood, on your, I think, gosh, how much of potentially depression or issues that kids are having could be mitigated by changing their diet, right? I mean, God, I see these kids these days, I mentor some youth as well. And I try to pick my battles. I can't win every battle. I'm trying to mentor them on other stuff. So sometimes I try to let what they're eating slide, but it's like, oh man, like these Takis, chips, and all these other these heavily processed foods, and then you see it. You see the lack of energy. You see they can get moody after, compared to when they eat healthier. There's been studies done on this. So yeah, gosh, not just on an energy level, but just in general, it's so important for your mental health, for just the way that you feel. And when you feel good, you're going to take more action and do more things. So yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. So let's say someone's listening right now, kind of the average person, maybe they've been trying to lose that extra 20 pounds they've been holding on to for a while. They kind of have maybe a little bit of a lack of energy. What are some things that they could potentially do? And where would you start maybe with your clients? Would you start with certain blood tests that you would always recommend, or what's kind of the process of evaluating what's the right thing for each person?
Yeah, I do something called a metabolic typing test that incorporates some ancestral heritage along with current patterns. And then I pair that with a continuous glucose monitor. And it's a good way to get kind of rough starting points for the macros on your plate, to figure out how much protein, fat, carbohydrates, but also which types, because we're all different. And like I was saying before, I used to try and do more of the grains and the, low fat, no fat, not as much meat. And I realized I'm actually the opposite of how I was trying to eat before. And I can't express how much better my energy levels are, the stability of it. But then what's cool is seeing it, because a lot of people feel it, but they discount it or just kind of write it off as whatever. But if you can see what's going on with your blood sugar levels and see it like creep up high out of like in range, and then like if it drops low, and then pair that visual or that data that's specific to you with how you're physically feeling, and then trying different foods. So I encourage people, don't change anything. Eat exactly how you're eating and just see how that's serving you or not. And then let's start tweaking some things. So maybe it's the exact same items you're eating, just let's make the ratios a little bit different. Or let's use your dinner leftovers for breakfast, savory for breakfast. Let's, if you're like, needing to do the oatmeal, let's try pairing it with maybe some bacon or breakfast sausage or avocado or some greens and thinking savory oatmeal versus maple syrup, and kind of like inch it along and shift it over, or give them really simple breakfast. Like, how about some breakfast sausage, some, process, or some shaved apples and carrots, like 3 ingredients, or cut up like onions, poblanos. And that can just be some easy, approachable ways to just try a breakfast that's a little different and just notice. And that's the biggest feedback I get from people when we start shifting is, oh my gosh, my energy's better and I don't have the need to snack and I'm not craving sweet things anymore. So it's kind of a win all around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And with regards to like blood testing, so let's say someone, I'm curious, which biomarkers are you most interested in when, let's say, someone would be coming to you saying, I'm feeling really lethargic, I just have a lack of energy. What kind of biomarkers are you most interested in there?
Well, when you're talking about blood work, fasting insulin is one of the ones that I like to look at, because it's not typically run at the doctor unless you're asking for it or for some reason you're able to do it, because our blood sugar, our body will prioritize that looking fine for much longer before the insulin's going to show up. But we don't test the insulin, standard. But if you look at the insulin, that's going to show you about 7 to 10 years before the blood sugar is going to start being off balance. Because what happens, your blood sugar rises. And like I was saying, that's damaging to your artery, your cell, your blood vessels. And so the insulin kicks in, and that's your store hormone. And so when that keeps coming up over and over and over again, because you're constantly grazing, constantly snacking or eating sugary, high processed foods, that insulin, that fasting insulin marker is going to be higher. That doesn't show up on your blood work though, unless you do the fasting insulin. So if you're just doing fasting glucose, you can have awesome looking fasting glucose because your insulin's doing the job, but your insulin can be on overdrive for a whole decade before your blood sugar even shows that. So that's one way where you can kind of get in front of it a little bit sooner. And then energy wise, I mean, you don't even need to run blood work to just ask somebody, do you get tired in the afternoon? Do you wake up ready to get out of bed, or are you like needing that cup of coffee? Like, do you enjoy the cup of coffee, or do you like need it? There's a difference. And, if people are, many people have that afternoon dip. That's common. It's not normal. And that's a reflection of, well, recovery potentially at night, but also what did you eat the last meal? Because if you're getting really tired after it, a lot of times it's too many processed carbohydrates. And that's pretty common for people to have like sandwiches or pastas at lunch. And a lot of times people are like, oh, I kind of want to lay down, or I'm just like not as focused, brain fog, or just kind of, maybe I need that cup of coffee in the afternoon. So that's where you really can just checking in 1 to 2 hours after you eat. How do you feel?
Yep. Yeah, that's a big one. I haven't eaten bread in like 10 years, over 10 years, something like that. Maybe a little bit here or there, but mainly because like it just made me feel awful, right? Like it just like drained my energy, made me feel awful, and I became very aware. Now, the thing is, what do you think about this? Because like I found that like if people are currently not eating healthy, really, it's maybe hard for them to even realize these things. But once you start eating healthy, like you can really start intuitively eating more. You can start kind of feeling like you can kind of feel what foods are good and what foods are not, and kind of almost sense like what you're going to have for your next meal based on what your body needs. Have you seen that at all as well?
Oh, I felt it. So I was that person, very health minded, and that's in quotes for people not watching the video, but I would have cereal for breakfast, lunch, dinner, was a couple pieces of toast, so a whole bunch of milk. And I mean, we would eat Chinese food and have 2 pieces of toast and a glass of milk with it. Like that's how I was raised. And so that's all I knew. And I never could understand how people could drink coffee in the morning. I'm like, that would just ravage my stomach, A. But I had a really good friend, not into nutrition, but she's like, try this like food type of cleanse. And it's just 2 weeks. So I'm like, well, okay, what do you got to do? And basically it was cut out all the inflammatory things, including gluten and dairy and, a
Hmm.
few other things. And I'm like, well, what do you eat? Like, that's literally everything I eat at every meal. And I was like, I don't know about this. I'm like, I've done an Ironman and like trained for all these things. I'm like, I don't know. She's like, it's just 2 weeks. I'm like, all right, I'll try it. A few days into it, I was like, wow, I like thought I felt fine before. I feel really good now. But like, if all you've ever known is blah or meh or just good enough, and you do that day after day after day, and everybody around you feels the same way, you don't know there's an alternative. And then everybody has to do it, including myself. You finish the thing, and then you get a craving for something that you hadn't have. So I was like, oh, I really want some grape nuts. So I had a bowl of grape nuts. I'm like, gosh darn it, my stomach feels terrible. And I just always had my stomach that felt off. That was part of my routine. I didn't realize it was off till I had a break from it. And then you have that break and you go back to it, and then you're like, this is not worth it. It feels so much better without. And so that's kind of the process. I think the journey most people have to go through is it needs to hurt enough to want to try something different, or somebody convincing enough is like, hey, come do this with me. And then you try it. And then you're like, wow, I really do sleep better at night, or I don't have bloat. I didn't realize I had bloat or gas. Like, that's not normal to have, those types of things. But it's very common. And because everybody around you has it, you think it's fine. And then there's actually an option of feeling differently. So yes, that's also my story.
Hmm.
I was that person I was the anti gluten-free person, between just how I grew up and my culinary background. I'm like, nope, I'm full gluten. And then after running tests on myself and then just like feeling it, like, wow, my body, I must have overdone it on the gluten growing up because my body hates it. And it's not even an option in my, like, I don't even miss it. That's the thing. I'm like, I couldn't imagine life without it. I doesn't even cross my mind that I want it anymore. Same as you. Like, I don't need bread.
Hmm.
Maybe in Europe
Yeah.
where they do different
Yeah.
things, but not
Right.
here.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, look, when I was had massive pain and inflammation in my body, kind of going on the paleo style, like, low inflammatory kind of diet really, really just changed everything for me. And so like, I was like, wow, like I feel amazing. I felt
Mhm.
horrible. I couldn't even type on a computer. I was in so much pain in my wrists and hands and arms for a while. And this was like, holy cow, like, all these doctors I went to, I got so many different diagnoses. Oh, it's a herniated disc. Oh, it's carpal tunnel. It's cubital tunnel. It's arthritis. I mean, you name it. And really, eventually one day it just clicked for me like, oh, inflammation comes from what I put inside my body. And so
Mhm.
if I change what I put in my body, I can lower inflammation. And so I
Mhm.
started researching low inflammatory, foods and diet and things like that. And it changed everything. I'm actually still a believer to this day that so many surgeries, for example, knee surgeries, back surgeries, shoulder surgeries, could be avoided if people actually lowered inflammation in their body. They could see the pain go away and they could see themselves be healed. So
100%.
yeah, I feel very strongly about that.
Mhm. 100%.
Yep. So I wanted to ask you then. So you mentioned each person's different, and you're going to work with people differently. So are there certain things, like if we could kind of make some generalized statements here?
Mhm.
Gluten bad, would that be one of them? You mentioned bloating as well. That's something I did
Mhm.
want to. It's such a hot topic these days. I keep hearing the word bloating, bloating. Everyone, now all these products are coming out for bloating, and every ad you see on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, these people are promoting. It's all like how to this product reduces bloating. Why are people getting bloated, and is there something they could do there?
There's a few reasons. One could just be the makeup of the bacteria. Good and bad's a little oversimplified, but people get it, so I'll say that. Having an imbalance of the good and bad, or too much of the bad, not enough of the good. It can be both directions. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Also, something called H. pylori can decrease your stomach acid.
Hmm.
This is something that a lot of people take Prilosec or, any antacids because they think they have too much, but actually more people have too little, because we are eating in a state of fight or flight instead of rest and digest. And so part of what needs to happen when you're eating is to produce pancreatic enzymes and digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid to break down your food all the way into the smallest piece. And if you're not doing that, or if you're not chewing enough, which also happens a lot, you have these big particles of food and they need to be down to a cellular size to get through the cells. And we don't want it to go between the cells. So if you have these extra chunks of food undigested, that's food for the bacteria. And then the byproduct of the bacteria is the gases. And so that can be another reason why people have bloat. But certain foods can also cause bloat. So there's food sensitivities, there's GI discomfort or distress, and then there's food allergies. They're all a little different. It's like the Venn diagram. They can overlap, but they don't have to. So some people, like the food intolerances, which has nothing to do with your immune system, that can give you that discomfort or the bloat. Whereas a food sensitivity is like your immune system reacting to something, but that doesn't mean it has to be a food allergy where it's anaphylactic or very dangerous. But over time, it's still creating stress in the body. So it could be a food sensitivity. And I think the biggest things people tend to notice that with are gluten and dairy. Although to your inflammatory points, I do have people pull out other inflammatory, like sugar's inflammatory. So gluten, sugar, dairy. A lot of people are very reactive to soy, alcohol. So those are ones that, at least for a period of time, just so you can understand, like the fish in water doesn't understand what water is till it's out of water. I have people remove the fish from the water. So then when they go back to each one strategically, you can actually see the effect it does or doesn't have on your body from a food intolerance standpoint.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And do you like these? I've heard mixed reviews about these like food sensitivity tests and a lot of these other tests. Or will you typically do those tests for your clients?
So they're not all created equally, like anything, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I used to do them right out of the gate. And then what I've kind of realized, I will still do them, but I don't do it out of the gate and I don't do it with everybody because upstream of that is typically a leaky gut, which means, your gut should be permeable. It should go back and forth and allow things to go out when it is the right time, but you don't want it chronically permeable because what that does is it allows the external world to come in contact with the internal world too much. And that can create a reactive or confused immune system where it starts targeting neutral things like the salmon or the avocado or things you don't want it responding to. So what I found when I was running it earlier was then people were like, oh my gosh, chicken. I'm sensitive to avocados, and then not really dealing with the why the gut is leaky in the first place. And things like gluten that will increase intestinal permeability for 4, 5, 6 hours after you eat it. So if you're having a cereal for breakfast, sandwich for lunch, and then pasta for dinner, it's open all day long. And then you have some alcohol in it, and a little bit of chronic stress from life is chronically open. But if you allow it to close like it should, then your immune system's going to be a little more, I guess, distinguishing of good versus bad. And so that's what I like to work on first before we get too in the weeds with food sensitivities. Because if you just swap out what your immune system's currently sensitive to for different ones, you're just going to rotate food sensitivities. So I think timing is also important for those. So they're not like good or bad. It's what's the purpose, I guess, what's the order of operations for like clients I've had with eczema. That can be really helpful in expediting the process of let's decrease the stressors we're putting into the body while supporting the vitality and like the functioning of the body to handle the things. So that can help speed up processes, but it is not like that's the reason, that's the symptom of the reason.
Mm, mm. What do you think causes the eczema in many cases? I'm sure there can be many reasons, but what do you think, or in general, if you had to kind of give a blanket answer?
Yeah, it's an overactive immune system. It's like responding unnecessarily to a neutral threat. And so, what typically happens is the liver isn't clearing things very effectively. It's either congested, and that's something you can pick up from GI map and or the Dutch hormone test. But also, because of a leaky gut, that immune system's like constantly on like go, and so it's like hyper vigilant. So it's a combination of the immune system, sluggish clearance of the liver, and then probably exposing yourself to those things the immune system's really pissed off about. And those, because so for those clients, when we cut out, because the cells from the base layer of your intestines, it's like the same layer, like cells as your skin, they slough off in about 3 weeks. So if you cut
Mm-hmm.
out like gluten, dairy, alcohol, try to like give yourself some rest recovery time, be more intentional about that. Within 3.5 weeks, all my people's skin has like turned that corner because it takes from that base layer cell to get to the top and slough off with that fresh, new, non-inflammatory environment. And they're just like, wow, why did they keep wanting to do creams and never ask me about my diet? I'm like, well, part of that's just, how everybody was trained. But to your point, inflammation, it's what you're putting in your body, right?
Yes,
And that
exactly.
is that like food is information for our cells. And so this
Yep.
is something that, again, back in the 80s, 90s, that was something to be avoided versus how do we give ourselves all the building blocks, the components that they need to thrive and function and do their best. And that's the shift that, instead of looking at meals as like, ooh, how long can I hold off and not have something? Which meals are going to offer my body the best building blocks to do what I care about?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What else can we do to get more energy? What are some, like, if you had to say, here are the core aspects of, increasing your
Yeah.
energy. We talked obviously about nutrition and diet and
Mm-hmm.
being careful of the spikes in glucose. Obviously, we know sleep is a big one, right? People need to prioritize their sleep and not be getting 4 hours of sleep or drinking alcohol at night, which if anyone has worn any sleep measuring device will see how it wrecks your sleep. Um, Anything else that you would say? I mean, I know you talk a lot about exercise. Is there can certain types of exercise be like, for example, I'll give you an example. Me myself personally, I found that like hit training just like really just like I crash out after, like I'm literally like I have no energy left for the rest of the day after, when I do intense hit training. And it doesn't like, I don't really want that. Like I don't
Yeah.
want to come home from the gym and like plop down on the couch because I have no energy to do anything for the rest of the day. Like I want to work out and still have energy and feel good and have that, positive dopamine effect that you get from exercise. So maybe a little bit talk about like exercise and any other core components that you think.
Totally. Well, exercise, while it can be really good for us, like any stimulus, in order to grow, you need to stress it, right? With proper recovery. And it's that proper recovery piece, like you mentioned, the sleep, and also having a strategic plan to the training program. Because if we're like maxing out on squats Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, do you think we're getting stronger? No, because our muscle fibers are tearing down, right? They're breaking down temporarily. This is what I talk to my athletes about. I'm like, when do you get stronger? It's not actually in the gym, it's in the recovery between the gym sessions. And that's why it's so important to allow yourself that recovery, active recovery. And so when people think about it like a total stress bucket, and stress can come from finances, from work, from a partner, from kids, from parents, from just thoughts going around your mind, from something that happened 15 years ago, from exercise. And so what happens is our body will always prioritize today's stressors at the expense of tomorrow. And part of today's stressors can include working out. And so if we're working out or like overreaching, overtraining day after day after day, that's going to affect our whole stress bucket, which is going to turn off some of the functionings like producing sex hormones, producing digestive enzymes, a proper thyroid functioning. Those are long-term projects. We're going to hold off on that. We're going to prioritize recovering from that workout or whatever today's stressors are. And then we'll deal with that if we're around tomorrow, right? And so having a plan with intentional recovery is really important because, like you said, you should feel energized for a couple hours after the workout versus beat. And high intensity interval training, when done properly, can be an awesome stimulus. And if your overall stress bucket's loaded with all the other departments, because you're not a professional athlete where that's the only thing you do and that's the only stressor you have or one of the only ones, then your nervous system's tapped out. Like you don't have capacity for that. And so different seasons, different ages in our life, different chapters, we have different needs for both what we can handle as well as our recovery. And that's something it took me. I mean, I was definitely that overtrainer for sure. And like just burn the candle on both ends. Just was like, if a little bit's good, I'm an overachiever, more is better, right? And I completely tanked my hormones, just threw them off. And then that's when you get injured. I actually did a Dutch test or like one of those like saliva, a urine tests several years ago. It was like during a high stress period of my life, and went on this hut trip, this backcountry ski trip, and didn't have the results. On the hut trip, I blew out my knee, like my ACL. I've like never had injuries in my life, but I was eating poorly, drinking more than I normally do, staying up late, getting up early to get everything in, and then training like every single day, high intensity stuff. And then when I got my results back, my cortisol was through the roof. My DHEA, which is your repair recover, was tanked. All my hormones, because of that, downstream of DHEA, were all thrown off. And on paper, I was like the exact recipe for an injury. But it's like, you just keep going, like just push through. And I wish I had known like how you could measure hormones like 10, 20 years ago. I mean, it was there. I just wasn't aware of it. And how for us, like numbers people who are like rewarded for tuning out the pain and like just pushing through. And, you get the badge of honor for having a crazy schedule and doing all the things, right? Had I known more about how that negatively impacts the whole hormone state, which is your whole body state, I would have trained very differently for a lot of the things I did and valued downtime, margins in the day to just sit for a second, like sit and read, just sit and not be like, crossing off a to-do item. But those things, you're like constantly fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight. And then that affects the nervous system. So adding a HIIT workout to something like that can just put somebody over the edge. And that's where you feel like depleted afterward, or just like me, or like I'm smoked. I just need to lay down. I don't want to engage with anybody. And so it's different for the same person at different parts of their lives, depending on all the other stressors in that bucket.
Yeah. 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 I mean, one of the big mistakes, I had a friend, who did this, and he was like, he wasn't working out at all. Wasn't eating good. And he's like, all right, I'm motivated now. I'm going to get into shape. I hired a trainer. I'm doing 2-a-days. I'm like, you don't want to go from nothing to 2-a-days. You know what I mean? Like it's too much. And of course, probably lasted less than a month and, got injured, burnt out, gave up on the trainer and went back where he was before. So I think, I think people actually, I think, might overestimate how much stimulus is even needed, right? Like, my wife, she eats halfway healthy most of the time and goes to Pilates twice a week and has a trainer once a week, and 3 times a week is what she does. And it works great for her. So, 3 hours a week, it's not really something insurmountable to do there. So, I think that's an important point to make. So, what else with regards to like hormones and just like energy levels in terms of things that people aren't really thinking about, or anything else there with regards to like things that you're looking for with regards to hormones, anything along those lines?
Well, before you mentioned hormones, I was thinking hydration, because that is something when people
Yeah.
are a little bit dehydrated, they can feel tired, they can feel
Yeah.
hungry, they can feel off. And just like as little
Yeah.
as 1% dehydration, that'll affect performance, like cognitive performance, but even like performance in the gym. And so that's something that can really help with energy levels, is staying hydrated, especially early in the day. And I like to recommend between meals, because back to those digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid to break down the food, if you have too much fluid with your meal, you're diluting the power of them. So have your meal, and then hopefully you're like sustained for a big gap. So then you have that time between the meal to hydrate really well. And so
Yeah,
that
I
can
think
really help.
yeah, I found that naturally, for some reason, I just naturally don't want to drink a lot while I'm eating. I can kind of
Mm-hmm.
feel it, for me, I don't know, naturally, I guess I'm lucky in that perspective. I had a friend who was having some gut issues, and then someone gave him the advice to just, hey, don't drink while you're eating for like, 30 minutes. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously you want to take in enough water in between your meals and things like that. But along the lines of hydration, how do you think like electrolytes and salt are important, or do you think just water is good? Do we have to be careful with the salt thing? Is a really interesting one, right? Because going back to
Mm-hmm.
80s health advice, like
Right.
no salt, no
Right.
sodium, zero. And now you got like the CrossFitters and the paleo guys, like we need more salt, LMNT electrolytes with 1,000 milligrams of
Mm-hmm.
salt in each serving. Where do you fall on that discussion?
I love minerals because it includes electrolytes and then it doesn't have like
Mhm,
the sugars or anything added to it. So I do like
mhm,
that because you can, if you're not, if you don't have a way to like hang on to the fluids, then you're just passing it straight through. So it is important to not overly dilute the minerals, the electrolytes that you have. And so, if people are sweating more or really active or stressed, then whether they're electrolytes or minerals, those can be beneficial and help them absorb it. But again, it's kind of like you remember when like Gatorade came out, then all of a sudden like all these sedentary people at the office are drinking Gatorade. I'm like, you don't really need the Gatorade. Like water's just
mhm.
fine. It depends on kind of the person too.
Yeah, that's the thing with the salt these days, right? It's like, you see people drinking these 1,000 milligram of salt of sodium electrolyte things, and it's like that was kind of meant for people who are working out, right?
Who
So
needed it?
yeah, you
Yeah.
got to be careful there. If you're just pounding salt all day, yeah, if you're sweating, or if you were
Yeah.
in the sauna for a half hour, or you were sweating from a crazy workout or whatever, and you're depleted, yeah, that's one thing. But yeah, if you're sitting around all day and then just like, oh, I heard salt's good for me, I'm gonna just start putting pounds of salt on everything.
Well,
That could backfire.
yeah, and I think so many people are like in the weeds, like, oh, should I get this specific like bar or this specific electrolyte or this specific thing? And really, there's so much that can be done with the more basic things, the bigger, the lower hanging fruit. Like you're saying, like getting good sleep, getting real food. You're
Hmm.
asking about things that can help with like hormones. Strength training is really important. I see so many women, especially when they get in their like 30s, 40s, like, oh, I want to improve my body composition. I'm going to go do a half marathon. I'm like, I couldn't think of something worse for your body composition than doing that in place of strength training because back to the hormone conversation, that's a big stressor. It's a chronic stressor for a lot of hours in a week. Whereas if you're strength training, that takes much fewer hours, and that increases your testosterone naturally. And so if you're trying to increase your muscle I guess composition, your body composition, improve that, and decrease your body fat, you're going to have much more bang for your buck strength training and of course moving around and doing some sort of like cardiovascular benefit activity. But the marathon, half marathon training is not where it's at because that is taxing. It's really throwing off your hormones, but it also throws off the nervous system. And I see so many people with like hip injuries or like, just things aren't feeling good. And then they're exhausted, like you said, after like a hit for you, then they're depleted. They're like, I don't want to hang out with anybody, And so, not to say people can't do that. It needs to be well thought out in the big picture of the week and what other commitments or stressors do people have in their world right now. Does that make sense right now? Because if the goal is to like decrease body fat and increase muscle mass, there's a way more efficient way of doing that through strength training and maybe some sprint training or something else that doesn't take up as much time and create as much stress or oxidative damage on your body.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really glad you brought that one up because that's kind of like one of those little pet peeves of mine. Like you hear people all the time, like oh I'm healthy. I'm gonna run a marathon or something, and it's like, listen, if you can run a marathon, that's a cool thing to do mentally and like an achievement that not a lot of people do. Like I'm all for that. That's cool, but don't kid yourself. running a marathon is one of the worst things you could do for your health. You're beating up your body. Like you said, you're hurting your nervous system. You're overworking certain parts. Like, it's not a healthy thing to do. And yeah, strength training and other ways of doing it. Obviously movement and all that, but not this chronic cardio. If you're spending an hour a day doing cardio and you're not doing strength training, I think you're missing out on a lot.
Well, and I'll tell you, in looking at people's labs, the people who have the highest oxidative stress are those ultra marathoners, the super endurance people. And, I don't know if they think they're doing it or if it's an escape from something else or swapping one addiction for another. All I can say is their oxidative stress is by far worse than my non-endurance people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this has been great, Katie. We've covered a lot of stuff. I know we've only scratched the surface. We could probably talk for hours about this stuff. I wanted to let's let people know, where can they find you, follow you, learn more, if they're interested in working with you.
Sure. Yeah. My website is mypeak, PEAK 365.com. I'm on Instagram as Hardie Peak Performance. It'll be switching over to My Peak soon. And yeah, I post on Instagram and Facebook. I post like a weekly recipe and just kind of tips for things that people can be doing to just like help energy, help manage hormones, balance hormones, just kind of optimize or improve just little things. It's all about just changing little things consistently. And so I try to offer support and tools for people to do that.
Yeah, that's great. We didn't even have a chance to get into your culinary background and how you help kind of making healthy taste good. So I think that's definitely something where people could follow you and learn more. So yeah, highly encourage people to follow you and learn more. And yeah, this was a great conversation. And I know we've only scratched the surface, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
That would be great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would really mean a lot to me if you would forward this episode along to any friends, family members, anyone that you think that would get value out of it and learn something important. The mission at Peak Performance is to help people prioritize and transform their health. And so if you think someone will get value, please, please, please do forward this episode along to them. Also, if you could please rate and review and subscribe on whatever podcast player you are listening to this on, we would greatly appreciate that as well. It means a lot. And I want to tell you about a couple of new products that we just released. You can get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com. That's BUY peakperformance.com. We just released a brand new grass-fed beef protein isolate. This is my favorite new protein powder because it's great for muscle building and recovering and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't give the stomach discomfort and gas that a lot of people get from different types of proteins like whey protein. Some types of plant proteins can do the same as well. It seems to be really, really easy on the stomach while still giving all the great benefits of muscle building and everything else that you want from taking in adequate protein. So check out our new beef protein isolate. We have it in unflavored, which I actually mix and blend with my morning coffee every morning. We have a vanilla and we have a chocolate. You can buy it on Amazon, but again, you also do get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com, BUY peakperformance.com. We've also recently released organic mushroom coffee. We have these in Keurig compatible K-cup coffee pods. We have organic mushroom coffee with lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, turkey tail, and chaga mushrooms blended with the high altitude organic coffee that we've been using and that we've been famous for years. So that's been a big hit, that one as well. You can get on our website or Amazon, any of our products. And of course, we're always famous for our organic green superfood powder that has almost 5,000 reviews on Amazon with a very high star rating. We're known as the best tasting USDA certified organic green superfood powder with over 25 plus organic ingredients. Again, we also have the organic red superfood powder. We still, of course, have the organic plant protein for those who do prefer the plant protein, but I'm really excited about this new beef protein isolate and all of our other products. We do have over 100 products, so just check us out if you type in Peak Performance Supplements on Amazon or if you go to buypeakperformance.com. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.